This land has a voice. Most people don't hear it. They drive past on the highway and see only what's on the surface, 1,000 acres of rolling, sun-scorched hills, a sea of brown grass under a vast, empty sky. They see dirt. They see worthlessness. But I have lived on this land for 50 years. I know its language. I can hear the stories it whispers on the wind, the secrets it holds deep within its rocky heart. My name is Martha Caldwell, but everyone who knows me calls me Marty. And this land is the last and most precious piece of my husband's soul. If you're listening to this, and you've ever loved a piece of earth like it was a member of your own family, please subscribe and let me know. This is a story about what happens when someone tries to tell you that the thing you love most is just dirt, and how, sometimes, that worthless dirt turns out to be worth more than they could ever possibly imagine. My late husband Tom was a man made of the same stuff as this land, tough, quiet, and with a hidden richness you'd only find if you took the time to look. He wasn't a farmer, he was a listener. He taught me how to read the earth like a book. He taught me how the direction of the gullies could tell you where water flowed deep underground, how the color of the scrub brush could hint at the minerals in the soil. "This land provides, Marty," he used to say, his hand resting on my shoulder as we stood on this very porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple. "You just have to be patient enough to listen to what it's offering." When he passed 2 years ago, he left this land to me, not to our daughter Susan, but to me. I knew why. He knew I was the only one who still spoke its language. He knew I was the only one who would protect it. Which is why the arrival of my son-in-law, Brendan, always felt like a violation. He arrived, as he often did, in a cloud of dust and arrogance. His gleaming black German SUV was an insult to the quiet gravel road, a noisy, intrusive beast in a world of patient, silent things. He stepped out, dressed in expensive golf attire, his face a mask of cheerful, predatory ambition. "Marty!" he boomed, striding onto my porch without waiting for an invitation. "Just checking in on my favorite mother-in-law. How's the Queen of the Dusty Plains today?" I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. "Brendan," I said, my voice calm, "what do you want?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Always straight to business, aren't you?" "I love that." He leaned against the porch railing, his gaze sweeping over the vast, empty expanse of my property. But he didn't see what I saw. He didn't see the history, the memories. He saw a blank canvas for his own greedy masterpiece. "I was just talking to some investors," he said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. "Big money, Marty. They are very, very excited about the prospect of the Caldwell Creek Golf and Country Club. Can't you just picture it? A beautiful green 18-hole course right here. A luxury clubhouse where that old, dilapidated barn island condos overlooking the 7th hole. We're not just talking about a golf course, Marty. We're talking about a legacy. My legacy," I thought with a cold, hard knot in my stomach, "was the land itself, not the scars he wanted to carve into it." "The land is not for sale, Brendan," I said, my voice quiet but firm. It was the same thing I had said to him a dozen times before. His charming smile tightened at the edges. "Marty, be reasonable," he said, his tone shifting from charming to condescending. "It's 1,000 acres of useless dirt. Nothing grows here but weeds. It's a burden on you. The property taxes alone. Think of Susan. Think of the grandchildren. Selling this land would secure their future for generations. My future, our future." I thought of a day, 30 years ago. Tom and I were walking this land with a 5-year-old Susan. We were standing under the crooked old oak tree near the creek bed. Tom was showing Susan how a single acorn, with enough time and patience, could grow into a mighty tree. "This tree is your legacy, Susie," he had told her, his voice full of love. "Its roots go deep. It will be here long after we're gone, just like this land." Now, her husband wanted to bulldoze that same tree to make way for a sand trap. "The land," I said again, my voice as unyielding as the bedrock beneath our feet, "is not for sale." This time, the frustration in his eyes was plain to see. But before he could argue further, Susan's car pulled up behind his. She got out, her face a mixture of hope and anxiety. My daughter loves me, I know she does, but she is dazzled by her husband's ambition, by the glittering promise of a life of effortless luxury that he dangles in front of her. She has forgotten the language of the land. Mom, she said, her voice soft and pleading. Did Brendan talk to you about the new offer? It's a very generous one. We could finally travel. You could buy a nice condo in the city, be closer to us. She was the emotional leverage, the good cop to his bad cop. They had rehearsed this. I don't want a condo in the city, Susan, I said gently. My home is here. And it was then that Brendan's patience finally snapped. He let out a short, sharp, ugly laugh. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated arrogance. A home, he scoffed, gesturing wildly at the vast, beautiful, and silent landscape. This isn't a home, Marty. It's a tax liability. It's 1,000 acres of nothing. He looked at me, his eyes glittering with a kind of pitying contempt, and he delivered the line he had clearly been thinking for years. A golf course is better than dirt, old woman. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Old woman. He had finally stripped away the last thin veneer of family pretense. He saw me as a foolish, sentimental obstacle. Nothing more. Susan flinched, a flicker of shame in her eyes. Brendan, don't. But I held up a hand, silencing her. I looked at my son-in-law. I looked at his handsome, greedy face. And in that moment, a new, cold, and very clear idea began to form in my mind. He thought he was playing a simple game of persuasion. He had no idea he was playing a game of chess, and he had just revealed his entire pathetic strategy in a single, foolish move. A slow, quiet calm settled over me. I'll think about it, Brendan, I said, my voice suddenly devoid of all emotion. You've given me a lot to consider. The surprise on his face was almost comical. He had expected a fight, tears, a storm of emotion. He did not know how to react to this sudden, quiet acquiescence. After they left, I stood on my porch for a long, long time, watching the dust from their cars settle back onto the quiet road. I looked out at my land, at Tom's land, and I could almost hear his voice on the wind. This land provides, Marty. You just have to be patient enough to listen to what it's offering. Brendan thought the land was offering him a golf course, but I had a sudden, powerful hunch that it was offering me something else entirely, something much, much older, and much, much more valuable. I walked back into my house, my steps now firm with a new purpose. I went to my old roll-top desk and pulled out a tattered, leather-bound address book. I flipped through the pages until I found the name I was looking for, George Petty, a geologist, and my husband's oldest and most trusted friend. It was time to find out what this land was really offering. George Petty arrived 2 days later, not in a flashy SUV, but in a dusty, battle-scarred pickup truck that looked as old and as reliable as he was. George is a man of the earth, in the most literal sense. He's in his 70s, with a face like a weathered rock formation and hands as rough as sandpaper. He spent 40 years as a field geologist, and he can read a landscape the way other men read a balance sheet. He was also my husband Tom's best friend since childhood. They had explored every inch of this land together as boys. If anyone else on earth spoke its language, it was George. He lumbered up onto my porch and wrapped me in a bear hug that smelled of dust and old spice. "Marty," he growled, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "You sound like you're up to something. Tom always said you were the dangerous one." I smiled, a real smile for the first time in days. "I need you to be a ghost for me, George," I said, leading him into the kitchen. Over coffee, I laid it all out. Brendan's relentless pressure, the insultingly low offer he was preparing with his investors, and his dismissal of my land as worthless dirt. I didn't tell him about my hunch. I didn't want to sound like a crazy old woman chasing a fantasy. I just framed it as a practical matter. "He's bringing in his own surveyors next week to assess the land for his golf course," I explained. "They will, of course, tell him exactly what he wants to hear. What I need, George, is the truth. Before I even consider his offer, I need to know, once and for all, what is really under our feet. I need a full, deep-core geological survey. And I need it done without anyone, especially Brendan, knowing you were ever here." A slow, shrewd grin spread across George's weathered face. He understood immediately. "So, the city slicker's son-in-law thinks he's about to pull a fast one on you, does he?" He chuckled. "He's about to find out that you don't play poker with the woman who helped invent the game." He took a long sip of his coffee. "It'll take me a few days. I'll bring my equipment out after dark. I'll work at night. No one will ever know I was here." For the next 4 nights, my land became a place of secret activity. I would watch from my bedroom window as the distant, single headlight of George's all-terrain vehicle moved silently across the dark hills, a lone firefly in a sea of black. He was a ghost, just as I had asked, drilling, taking samples, listening to the secrets the earth had held for 1,000,000 years. During the day, I had to endure the company of the enemy. Brendan and Susan were a constant presence, their visits filled with a new, cloying sweetness. They brought me groceries. Susan offered to clean the house. Brendan spent an entire afternoon fixing a loose board on my porch, his face a mask of dutiful son-in-law concern. It was a charm offensive, a campaign to soften me up before the final assault. "We found the perfect architect, Mom," Susan gushed one afternoon, showing me glossy renderings of a sprawling, ostentatious clubhouse on her tablet. "And the investors are ready to go. Brendan has put together a final offer. He wants to present it to you tomorrow. Please, just listen with an open mind. This is for all of us. All of us." The phrase was a constant refrain, a guilt-laden mantra designed to make me feel selfish, to make me feel like the sole obstacle standing in the way of the entire family's happiness. The night before Brendan was to present his offer, George appeared on my porch again, just as the last light of the sun was bleeding from the sky. He didn't say a word. He just held a thick manila folder in his hands. His face was pale, his usual gruff, jovial expression gone, replaced by a look of profound, stunned disbelief. "Come inside, George," I said, my own heart beginning to beat a little faster. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had shared 50 years of meals with my husband. He opened the folder. It was filled with maps, mineral analysis charts, and pages of technical data I didn't understand. "Marty," he began, his voice strangely hoarse, "Tom and I, we walked this land 1,000 times. We thought we knew everything about it, the limestone deposits, the quartz veins, the granite bedrock." He shook his head, a slow, wondering motion. "We were fools. We were like children, playing in the sand on top of a buried treasure chest and never knowing it was there." He turned one of the maps around to face me. It showed my property, but it was covered in a series of concentric, color-coded circles, all centered on the area around the crooked old oak tree near the creek bed. "What am I looking at, George?" I whispered. He took a deep breath. 30 feet below that old oak tree, Marty, there's a lode, a primary deposit." He paused, as if the words themselves were too heavy to say. "It's gold, Marty. Not just flakes, not just dust. We're talking a concentrated, high-grade vein of orogenic gold, the kind that makes men lose their minds." I stared at him, the world seeming to tilt slightly. "Gold? And that's not all," he said, his voice dropping even lower. He pointed to a series of smaller circles spreading out across the northern section of the property. "This is a placer deposit. The whole northern pasture. It's what's known as an alluvial fan. For thousands of years, the creek has been eroding that main vein and washing gold downstream, depositing it in the gravel bed. It's everywhere." He finally looked me in the eye. The stunned disbelief was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated awe. "I've run the numbers 3 times, Marty, because I didn't believe them myself. Based on the core samples, the concentration levels, the current market price, a conservative estimate of the value of the gold deposit sitting under your worthless dirt is $500 million. The number hung in the air, vast and silent and impossible. $500 million. I felt a strange, light-headed sensation, a mixture of shock and a wild, almost hysterical amusement. I thought of Brendan, of his grand plans for a golf course, his condescending lectures on property taxes. He was a child, trying to build a sandcastle on the shores of an ocean of wealth he was too blind to see. My laughter started as a small, quiet chuckle. Then it grew, a wave of pure, incredulous joy. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. George, after a moment of stunned silence, joined in, his deep, gravelly laugh shaking the entire kitchen. We were 2 old friends, laughing at the single greatest cosmic joke we had ever heard. When our laughter finally subsided, a new, cold clarity settled over me. The game had changed. This was no longer just about protecting my husband's legacy. It was about delivering a lesson in humility so profound, so absolute, that it would echo for generations. I looked at the report, at the maps that laid out a future of unimaginable wealth. "George," I said, my voice now calm and steady, "I need you to do one more thing for me. I need you to disappear. This report, your findings, they do not exist. This conversation never happened." A slow, shrewd grin returned to his face. He understood. "Consider me a ghost, Marty," he said. The next morning, Brendan and Susan arrived, their faces shining with a triumphant, predatory gleam. They sat me down at my kitchen table, the very table where I had received the news that would change everything. They slid a thick, professional-looking binder across the table. The cover read, "A proposal for the Caldwell Creek Golf and Country Club." I opened it. I looked at the glossy pictures, the financial projections, the insultingly low offer for my land. And then I looked up at their expectant faces. And I began the performance of a lifetime. I took my time looking through the proposal. I let the silence in the kitchen stretch out, letting their anticipation build. I turned each glossy page with a slow, deliberate movement, my face a mask of weary consideration. Inside, my mind was a whirlwind of cold, hard calculation, but on the surface, I was the woman they expected me to be, a tired, sentimental old woman, finally being worn down by the relentless logic of the modern world. Brendan and Susan sat opposite me, practically vibrating with a barely contained impatience. They watched my face for any sign of weakness, any flicker of acquiescence. "The offer is very generous, as you can see, Marty," Brendan finally said, unable to bear the silence any longer. He pointed to a number on the page, a number that, just 24 hours ago, might have seemed substantial. Today, it looked like a pittance, a handful of pennies offered for a king's ransom. "It's enough for you to live in luxury for the rest of your life. A beautiful condo. No more worrying about this dirt." I continued to look at the pages. I saw the architectural drawings of his clubhouse, a monstrous glass and steel structure, sitting directly on top of the spot where George's map had shown the main gold lode. I saw the artist's rendering of happy, wealthy people playing golf, their carts zipping over the very land where Tom and I had planted the crooked oak tree. The sheer, blind arrogance of it all was breathtaking. Finally, I closed the binder. I let out a long, slow, mournful sigh. It was a perfect performance of defeat. "You're right, Brendan," I said, my voice a soft, wavering whisper. I did not look at him. I looked out the kitchen window, at the rolling brown hills. "It's too much for me. Tom, he understood this land. I'm just a lonely old woman. And you have such vision." The look of triumphant relief that washed over his face was a sight to behold. He had done it. He had finally broken the stubborn old woman. He exchanged a quick, victorious glance with Susan, who gave him a small, proud smile. "I knew you'd see it our way, Mom," Susan said, her voice full of a warm, patronizing affection. "This is for the best, for everyone." "But," I said, holding up a single, trembling hand, "I have one condition." Brendan's smile tightened. "A condition?" The deal was done. "What is it, Marty?" he asked, his voice laced with a new thread of impatience. "The money," I said, shaking my head sadly. "It's a generous offer, but it feels cold. It feels like I'm selling his memory. Selling our life together to strangers, to your investors." I looked at them, my eyes wide and full of a carefully crafted sentimental plea. "I want to keep it in the family." Brendan and Susan exchanged a confused look. "What do you mean, Marty?" Brendan asked. "The golf course will be in the family." "No," I said. "I mean the land itself. I don't want to sell it to your corporation. I want to sell it to you and Susan, and not for this pile of money. I want to give it to you, a gift, to secure my daughter's future." Now they were truly stunned. They were staring at me as if I had just sprouted a second head. They had come prepared for a negotiation, for a fight. They were utterly unprepared for a complete and total surrender. "A gift?" Brendan stammered. "Well, not a gift, legally," I said, waving a dismissive hand. "We have to make it official, for the tax man." I looked him in the eye, my expression one of pure, simple-minded generosity. "Sell it to you. For $1. The silence in the room was absolute. Brendan was staring at me, his sharp, calculating mind trying to find the catch, but he couldn't. Because he was looking for a business angle, a hidden financial trap. He was incapable of understanding that the trap was not financial, it was sentimental, and it was brilliant. $1, he breathed, a slow, incredulous grin spreading across his face. He thought I was a sentimental old fool. He thought my grief had finally broken my mind. And he was more than happy to take advantage of it. And Susan's name will be on the deed with yours, of course, I added. My daughter, it's for her. Of course, he said quickly, eagerly. This was better than his wildest dreams. He wouldn't have to deal with his investors. He would own the entire massive project himself. He would be the sole king of his new, green kingdom. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers immediately, I said. We can sign tomorrow. That's wonderful, Marty, he said, his voice thick with a false, greasy emotion. You won't regret this. Oh, I know, I said, my voice a soft whisper. There was one final piece of the puzzle to put in place, the master stroke. Just one more thing, I said, as they were getting up to leave, giddy with their unbelievable victory. A silly, sentimental request from a foolish old woman. They stopped, their expressions indulgent. Of course, the old fool would have one last, silly request. In the contract, I said, looking down at my hands as if I were embarrassed. I want to add a small clause. It's nothing really, just for my memories. Tom and we used to walk this land and he would find the most beautiful rocks for me. Agates, bits of quartz. He called them my pretty rocks. It's silly, I know, but I would like the contract to state that while you own the land, I get to keep the rights to any pretty rocks or minerals that might be found on the property, just as a keepsake, a way for me to hold on to a piece of him. I looked up at them, my eyes wide and watery. It was the most brilliant performance of my life. Brendan actually laughed, a loud, booming laugh of pure, condescending amusement. He looked at Susan and shook his head, as if to say, "Can you believe this old woman?" "Minerals?" he chuckled. "Marty, the only minerals on that land are dirt and weeds. But if you want to come collect pretty rocks after I've built my golf course, you be my guest." He waved a dismissive hand. "Put it in the contract, whatever you want. It doesn't matter." It doesn't matter, the 4 most expensive words he would ever speak. The next day, we sat in my lawyer's office. Brendan barely even glanced at the contract, his eyes already seeing the rolling green fairways and the glittering clubhouse. He was too blinded by his victory to read the fine print. He didn't notice the legal, binding, and utterly ironclad language my lawyer had used to define minerals. He just saw the silly, sentimental clause about pretty rocks, and he initialed it with a flourish. I signed the deed over to him and my daughter. I accepted a crisp, new $1 bill from my son-in-law. And as I looked at his beaming, triumphant face, I had to physically restrain myself from smiling. The game was over, and he had just been checkmated. He just didn't know it yet. The transformation of my land began with a violence that was swift and absolute. Within a week, the bulldozers arrived. They were like monstrous yellow beasts, tearing into the quiet, brown earth that I had known my entire life. I would sit on my porch, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, and I would watch. The first casualty was the crooked old oak tree by the creek bed, the tree where Tom had taught Susan about the power of an acorn, the tree where we'd had 100 family picnics. I watched as a massive bulldozer lowered its blade and slammed into the ancient trunk. The tree shuddered, resisted for a moment, and then fell with a great, groaning crash that seemed to shake the very foundations of my house. It felt like a death in the family. Brendan was clearing the way for his 7th hole. My son-in-law was a man reborn. He was no longer the frustrated supplicant developer. He was a king, a titan, the visionary creator of the Caldwell Creek Golf and Country Club. He was on the land every single day, shouting orders, pointing at blueprints, his face tanned by the sun and flushed with the sheer, unadulterated thrill of his own perceived genius. He even threw a party, an absurd, extravagant, groundbreaking ceremony right there in the middle of the scarred and wounded landscape. He invited his investors, local politicians, society figures. He stood on a temporary stage, a golden shovel in his hand, and he gave a speech. Some people, he said, his voice booming across the dusty field, looked at this land and saw nothing. They saw a sentimental attachment to a worthless patch of dirt. He paused for dramatic effect, and though he didn't look at me, I knew he was talking about me. I was there, of course. I had been invited as a guest of honor, the benevolent matriarch who had so generously made all of this possible. I sat in the front row, my expression one of quiet, serene pride. The perfect supportive mother-in-law. But he continued, his chest puffed out, I saw potential. I saw the future. I saw a world-class destination. And with the loving support of my family, we are turning a forgotten piece of the past into a glittering beacon of the future. There was a round of polite, self-congratulatory applause. He then plunged the golden shovel into the earth, a symbolic act of conquest. My daughter, Susan, stood beside him, her eyes shining with adoration. She was the wife of a great man, a visionary. She had completely bought into the fantasy. She looked over at me and gave me a small, pitying smile. The smile of a woman who believes her own mother is a simple, sweet fool who simply doesn't understand the way the world works. I smiled back, a gentle, knowing smile of my own. The phone calls became a regular occurrence. Brendan would call me every few days, his voice a thick, greasy mixture of condescending pity and a need for validation. Just wanted to check in, Marty, he'd say, his voice loud over the sound of machinery in the background. It's incredible what's happening out here. You wouldn't even recognize the place. We've leveled the whole northern pasture. It's going to be a beautiful driving range, so much better than all those weeds. I'm sure it is, Brendan, I would say, my voice a soft murmur. Are you doing okay? He'd ask, the concern in his voice utterly fake. Not feeling too lonely, rattling around in that old house? I'm keeping busy, I'd reply, and I was. While he was busy moving dirt, I was busy moving money. I had met with my financial advisors. I had met with a team of mining engineers recommended by George. I had, with the help of my lawyer, set up a new corporation, a very quiet, very discreet corporation. It was called TC Mineral Rights, LLC. The TC stood for Tom Caldwell. Well, you just take care of yourself, he'd always end the call. And don't you worry, we'll make sure you get an honorary lifetime membership at the club. You can come and collect all the pretty rocks you want. He would always chuckle at that part, his little joke. The silly, sentimental clause in the contract. The months passed. The seasons changed. The raw, brown wounds on my land slowly began to be covered by a blanket of unnaturally green turf. The clubhouse, a monstrous monument to Brendan's ego, began to take shape, and with every passing day, his confidence grew into an insufferable arrogance. He had done it. He had taken 1,000 acres of nothing and was turning it into his personal empire. He was the smartest man he had ever met. I just watched, and I waited. I knew the land, and I knew the maps George had given me. And I knew that the spot they had chosen for the deep excavation of the water hazard on the 7th hole was directly over the area George had marked with a large, red X. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. It was not from Brendan, it was from Susan, and she was hysterical. "Mom," she cried, her voice a frantic, breathless squeak. "You have to get down here. You won't believe it. It's a miracle. An absolute miracle." "Susan, calm down, dear," I said, my heart giving a single, quiet, triumphant leap. "What's happened?" "They were digging the big pond for the 7th hole," she gasped. "The excavators. They hit something. At first they thought it was just rock, but it was shining, Mom. It was shining. They've found gold, Mom. Brendan has found gold. We're rich. We're billionaires." I let the silence on my end of the phone hang in the air for a long, delicious moment. "Gold, you say?" I finally asked, my voice a perfect imitation of gentle, grandmotherly surprise. My, isn't that a wonderful surprise for you both?" "Brendan is calling a press conference," she squealed, completely lost in her ecstasy. "He's a genius. Everyone thought this land was worthless, but he knew. He had a vision. You have to come down and see it, Mom. Right now." Of course, dear, I said, my voice as calm and smooth as the surface of a still, deep lake. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I hung up the phone. I walked over to my closet and took out the outfit I had bought for this very occasion. A simple but beautifully tailored blazer, a pair of sharp new boots. I looked at myself in the mirror. The foolish old woman was gone. The sentimental widow was gone. The woman looking back at me was the one who had been there all along, the woman who had listened to the land. I then made a call of my own. "Hello, David," I said to my lawyer. "It's Marty. It's time. I'll meet you at the site in 1 hour." The game was over. The trap had been sprung, and now it was time to collect my winnings. The construction site for the 7th hole was a scene of controlled chaos. Local news vans were already parked haphazardly on the newly laid turf, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. A small crowd of investors, local dignitaries, and bewildered-looking golf course architects had gathered around a large, muddy pit in the ground. And in the center of it all, standing like a conquering hero, was my son-in-law, Brendan. He was holding a large, jagged piece of quartz rock, and running through it, thick and unmistakable, was a vein of pure, glittering gold. He was beaming, his face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and a profound, earth-shattering arrogance. He was not just a brilliant developer anymore. He was a man of destiny, a modern-day Midas. My daughter, Susan, was clinging to his arm, her face a mask of tearful, hysterical joy. She was the wife of the luckiest man on earth. They were the new royalty of the county. I arrived not in my dusty pickup truck, but in the back of my lawyer David's sleek, black town car. We didn't park with the others. We drove right onto the manicured green of the fairway, stopping a respectful but authoritative distance from the crowd. The car itself was a statement. It was a piece of the city, of power and law, invading this rural scene of chaotic celebration. We got out of the car, I, in my sharp blazer and boots, David in an impeccable dark gray suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase. Our arrival did not go unnoticed. A murmur went through the crowd. Brendan and Susan turned to look at us, their expressions a mixture of surprise and mild annoyance. My presence was an unexpected, slightly inconvenient footnote in the grand story of their triumph. Brendan, ever the showman, recovered quickly. He strode towards me, his smile wide and magnanimous. "Marty," he boomed, holding up the gold-laced rock as if it were a holy relic. "Can you believe it? Right under our feet the whole time. I knew this land had potential. I knew it." "You certainly had a vision, Brendan," I said, my voice calm, my own smile a small, enigmatic thing. He laughed, a loud, self-congratulatory sound. "I guess my golf course is going to have the most expensive water hazard in the world. Don't you worry, Marty. We'll take care of you. We'll name the clubhouse after you." "That's very thoughtful, dear," I said, "but I'm afraid there has been a slight misunderstanding." His smile faltered. "Misunderstanding? What are you talking about? It's a gold rush, Marty. We're rich." "You," I said, my voice still quiet, but now with a new, hard edge that cut through the celebratory air, "have a beautiful golf course, for which I wish you every success." I paused, letting the silence hang. "The gold, however, is mine." He stared at me as if I had just started speaking a foreign language. Then he let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "What? Marty, don't be ridiculous. I bought the land. I own the land. I own everything on it and everything in it." "Not quite," my lawyer, David, said, stepping forward. He opened his briefcase and took out a single, crisp document. It was a copy of the sales contract. "If you'll direct your attention to Schedule C, Addendum 4B, the clause you so helpfully initialed yourself." Brendan snatched the paper from his hand, his expression shifting from triumph to a confused, angry scowl. Susan peered over his shoulder. I could see their eyes scanning the page, finding the silly, sentimental clause. David read it aloud for the benefit of the now silent and very interested crowd. "Notwithstanding the transfer of the surface property, the seller, Martha Caldwell, shall retain sole and exclusive, perpetual, and transferable ownership of any and all precious metals, minerals, and gemstones, as defined by the State Geological Survey, found on, within, or beneath the aforementioned property." He looked up, his face impassive. "It's quite an ironclad mineral rights clause, I must say." The world seemed to stop. The color drained from Brendan's face. He looked from the paper to my lawyer, and then, finally, to me. And in my eyes, in my calm, knowing smirk, he finally saw the truth. He finally understood the game he had been playing and the devastating, absolute nature of his loss. "Pretty rocks?" he whispered, the words a choked, strangled sound. You knew. This whole time. The $1 deal. You knew." "I knew that my husband taught me to listen to the land, Brendan," I said, my voice ringing with a clear, final authority, "and I knew that you were too arrogant to ever read the fine print." Susan began to sob, not with joy now, but with the harsh, ugly tears of a dream turning to dust. "Mom, how could you?" she cried. "We're your family." "My family," I replied, my gaze fixed on her. The last vestiges of my maternal softness gone, replaced by a cold, hard disappointment, is the one who respects their legacy, not the one who tries to sell it off for a driving range. You made your choice, Susan. You chose his vision over your father's memory. I turned to the stunned reporters and the silent investors. "My apologies for the interruption," I said, my voice now the voice of a CEO, of the sole owner of the $500 million Caldwell Creek gold mine. Vance Industries, in partnership with TC Mineral Rights LLC, will be issuing a formal press release tomorrow morning regarding the future of this site. Construction on the golf course is, of course, halted, effective immediately. All unauthorized personnel are now requested to vacate my property. The finality of it was absolute. My lawyer handed Brendan a cease and desist order. He just stared at it, a broken man in a sea of his own, ruined ambition. The golden rock slipped from his numb fingers and fell to the ground with a dull thud. I didn't wait for the fallout. My work here was done. I turned my back on my weeping daughter and my catatonic son-in-law and walked back to the car. As we drove away, I looked back at the land. My land. Tom's land. It was scarred and wounded from the construction, but I knew it would heal. The dirt, the beautiful, worthless dirt, had held its secret patiently for 1,000,000 years, and in the end, it had provided, just as Tom always said it would, it had provided justice, and it had given me back my own name.